Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Jessica Devereaux in Baltimore. A judge in West Virginia sentenced the former CEO of coal company Massey Energy to 1 year in jail and fined him $250,000. You may remember Donald Blankenship from the 2010 explosion at Upper Big Branch Mine in West Virginia, which killed 29 miners. With us to discuss whether justice has been served is our guest, Bob Kincaid. Bob is the board president of the Coal River Mountain Watch, and he's joining us now from Fayette County, West Virginia. Thanks so much for joining us, Bob.
It's my pleasure.
So, Bob, first, let's take a look at the reaction of one of the victims' relatives. His name is Tommy Davis. He lost his son, his brother, and a nephew in the explosion. Let's take a look.
I miss my family. He hugged his, and all he gets is a year, and she done great. She gave him what she could give him. But they need to be stricter, more harsh penalties for people like that who puts greed and money over human life.
So, Bob, do you think Blankenship got off easy here?
I think that Don Blankenship certainly was not punished for that which he did. $250,000 in terms of a fine is going to be meaningless to him. He can shake that out of the sofa cushions. As for doing a year in jail, the idea that a year in Club Fed somehow provides recompense for the shady business practices, sharp business practices that led to 29 human beings being incinerated past recognition as ever having been human. No, that's not justice.
So how is he actually responsible? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, what Don Blankenship did is he, years before, had done everything in his power to break the union and had successfully done so. And then he instituted a culture inside Massey Energy that said that if you weren't moving coal, you weren't working, you weren't earning your money, and that any time spent on safety issues was time that was taking away from profit. And so consequently, he created a culture of disdain for vital safety regulations that were designed to save people's lives.
But Blankenship, he did receive the maximum possible sentence for his crime, which was a misdemeanor. He was found guilty of conspiring to violate federal mine safety standards. So if you're arguing justice wasn't exactly served here, what would real justice look like then?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, real justice would be him spending the rest of his life out in Supermax in Colorado with the Unabomber for a neighbor. But the larger problem here, Jessica, is that the judge did sentence him to as much as she could give him. The problem is that there was nothing for her to give, and that's because the Congress, in its infinite wisdom, has determined that, for instance, he had been charged with the felony of defrauding shareholders, but the misdemeanor of conspiring to get around safety regulations. So what we know from the Congress of the United States is that it's a felony to rip off a shareholder, but conspiring to violate safety regulations that incinerates 29 human beings, that's a misdemeanor. No biggie.
Yeah. So, Bob, this isn't the first time that environmental and legal transgressions have occurred against coal miners, and I'm sure you would even argue West Virginians. But there's always been this sense of loyalty to the coal industry amongst West Virginians. At least that is what is portrayed in Washington. Why are people so loyal if they really are that loyal to coal?
Well, we have to define that loyalty in the first place. Coal is all that West Virginia has had for all intents and purposes for the last 125 years. It has been the dominant driving industry of the state. And while there were labor uprisings in the early 20th century, for instance, those were not miners being loyal to coal. Those were miners demanding their human rights. And so it's a loyalty born of desperation. You're loyal to that which is can we even call that loyalty when it's all there is?
All right. And Bob, your experience as an advocate, is that shifting at all? Are people sort of pointing out that coal isn't necessarily in their best interest when it comes to climate change and things of that nature?
I live in a place, Jessica, where science and facts are not particularly welcome. The coal industry denies the reality of climate change. Coal itself is treated like a religion now. some sort of orthodoxy as opposed to a mere business. Climate change isn't something that people really even take seriously around here. You can't even get people here to acknowledge that most of the coal is in fact gone. We just elected a Republican legislature a couple of years ago for the first time in 83 years, essentially on the promise that they were going to make more coal magically appear underground. That just isn't there. People don't want to let go of this because it's all we know. And the larger conversation about what the future would be that should have taken place 40 years ago didn't take place, and we just pretended it was always going to be there. Well, now we're at the place where we have to confront our reality.
And when you say it's just not there, what do you mean by that? How can you tell how much coal is still left in the ground?
Well, you wouldn't be blowing up mountains to get 6-inch seams of coal if there were 6-foot seams still to be mined underground. We reached peak coal in Appalachia years ago. And of course, the peak theory says that once you pass that peak, it's going to be harder and more expensive to get at and of lower quality. And that's exactly where we are. We are simply running out in Appalachia. The rest, there's still plenty of coal in other parts of the country, but we've had just about all we've given just about all the coal industry can take.
All right, Bob, hang tight. We're going to pause the conversation here, and we'll be back to talk about the future of coal. We'll be right back.